Hi there, my name is Meredith Bay. I'm a certified professional coach. And in this video today, we're going to cover some of the most frequently asked questions I get from folks who are also considering becoming a professional coach. So in this video, I'm going to cover 12 of those top questions, including how did I get into coaching? What's my background? What the landscape is like for coach training and education programs, whether or not going through certification makes sense, how my business works in practice, what sort of a day in the life is like, or a week in the life is like for me, talking about finding your niche and the importance of that. Next on the list, we'll talk about the income picture. Like, let's get real about money and what it looks like in the early days of launching your own coaching business. We'll also talk about other lines of business, so other sort of sources of diversified income that a lot of coaches engage in. Then we'll talk about what's great about coaching, the awesome reasons why it can be a great choice for you. And we'll talk about, on the flip side, why you might not want to go into it. Some real talk around some of the challenges and things that you want to just keep in mind as you're considering this. We'll talk about very briefly LLC, liability insurance type stuff, where to find more information. And then last but not least, rounding out our list of dozen questions, we'll just sort of recap with, is this something that does make sense for you or not? And finally, talk about next steps if you have more in-depth questions about any of this. So I just want to define a couple of parameters quickly. First, number one, I am not a certified mentor coach through the ICF. So if you are reaching out, if you found my website thinking that I might be a person to do your coach supervision hours for the ICF, that is not something that I am currently certified to do, nor is it something that I'm planning to add to my business in the near future. Also, I am not a business or legal or financial advisor, okay? All I'm doing in this video is speaking from my experience launching my own business, speaking from the standpoint of the training and certification programs that I went through. This is not, of course, a representative sample of all coaches in the industry or the only way that you could go about doing this, okay? And last quick definition before we jump into those FAQs. I also want to clarify how I'm defining coaching, which should, be obvious at this point. But I get questions from a lot of folks who are at very, very diverse stages of awareness or understanding about what this thing even is. When I am talking about coaching for the purpose of this video, I am referring to coaching as defined by the ICF, the International Coach Federation. You'll hear me refer to them quite a lot. They are the official sort of oversight body of this profession. Coaching in that sense is really about not giving advice, not being a consultant, not being someone who comes in and provides solutions, but rather being a really thoughtful listening partner, someone who's engaged in asking powerful questions and really drawing out the inherent wisdom, insight, creativity, and resourcefulness of the client. So in that definition, the client really is the subject matter expert. You as the coach are there to challenge and draw them out and help them see new perspectives. Now, that's sort of the purest form of coaching. Now, something we'll be talking about a little bit more in this video is that really pure definition of coaching is actually pretty rarely seen in the wild in the industry. What we actually see much more commonly is sort of a hybrid coach / mentor, trainer, teacher, advisor, consultant. Okay. And we'll talk about why that's important. A lot of times, coaching is an unregulated industry, so you'll just see all sorts of people on the internet advertising themselves as a coach of some sort. That's just sort of a noun that gets slapped onto everything these days. So be really thoughtful for your own purposes, and if you're doing market research, or perhaps looking for a coach for yourself, that when someone else says coach, that they mean it in the same way you do, because they can be wildly different types of services offered, all kind of hiding under that one overly generalized umbrella term. Okay, let's dive in. Question number one, how did I get into coaching and what's my background? I went through coach training through the Coactive Training Institute, or CTI. in Northern California in 2018. I wound up there through a series of weird happenstances, mostly in which one of my good friends had just been through a different coach training program, started telling me about what this field, what this profession was. I'd never even heard of it before. And I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds exactly like what I've always wanted to do. Like, I didn't realize this was a thing. I didn't know it had a name. I didn't know it was a job. And so for me, it unfolded very quickly, almost without any other thought. I just signed up, joined that program. Stars kind of aligned, and it worked out beautifully. My professional background was first in nonprofit management, and then in the corporate tech world, doing a lot of hands-on tech work, consulting, management consulting, advising, individual coaching, team coaching, executive coaching, and all of this sort of evolved in parallel with my formal coach training education through CTI. I eventually began sprinkling in little bits more of actual coaching into those other consultative engagements I was already doing. So that was sort of my sneaky guerrilla warfare way of getting hands-on practice while remaining with a safety net in the corporate world. It's a much deeper story than that, but that's sort of the quick resume version of it for now. Now let's talk about FAQ number 2, all about coach training. I mentioned I went through CTI. That happens to be one of the largest, oldest coach training schools in sort of that purest form. They're really not focused at all on, helping you find your niche. They're not talking about business competencies. It's really just the most fundamental practices of actual coaching in the moment with a client. Now, there are loads and loads of other schools out there, and more crop up every day that do offer coach training. And that is something that you want to embark on your research sort of with the end in mind of what your bandwidth is, what your availability is, schedule flexibility if you want in-person or remote, what your budget is, what your timeline is, because there's so many different schools that cater to lots of different formats for folks. So give some thought before you begin your research on what you might want. Otherwise, you'll probably get pretty overwhelmed with the number of options out there. The most important thing to keep in mind when you are starting to look at coach training programs is whether or not you are going to want to go through an official certification process through the ICF at the end of this. Now, you may not know for sure if that's something that you want, and that's okay. But something to be very attuned to is that not all coach training schools are eligible, like their credits don't necessarily count towards getting certified through the ICF. So you want to, if you think there's even a chance that you might want to go on to be certified, I'll talk about that more in a second. Keep an eye out, make sure that you're only looking at, within the whole universe of possibilities of coach training programs, make sure you've really honed that down into ones that are actually eligible, their credits sort of apply for ICF certification. The way to find that is on the ICF website. They have listings of accredited programs. Okay, moving on to FAQ number 3, to certify or not to certify. I get this question a lot. I am certified through the ICF. That was an optional thing that I chose to do really for 2 reasons. And these would be the reasons that I would encourage you to think through for yourself as you're trying to make this decision. Reason number 1, I wanted to keep my options open for doing corporate coaching engagements, at least in the US, which is the vantage point from which I'm speaking about all of this. 99.9% of corporate coaching work really requires as table stakes that you have at least your ACC, which is the lowest level certification through the ICF. There are a few other certifying bodies around the world, but ICF sort of the heavy hitter, at least in the US. And the I stands for international. So they've got a lot of members from around the world too. So 1, will you want to do corporate coaching work potentially or not? Private clients could not care less. No one outside of this very incestuous world of coaching has any clue what the ICF is. No one's ever heard of these certifications. People can, average B2C consumers really do not know or care if you are certified. So if you know right now that all you want to do is do one-on-one private client work, and you're especially with a population that isn't that, savvy about certification stuff, maybe don't bother. Reason number two why I chose to pursue certification was really just to help with the imposter syndrome factor for myself. I knew that as I was going to launch my own business, it was going to be really, really easy for me to get in my own head, start doubting, second guessing myself and going, do I even really know what the hell I'm doing here? And so going through the certification process for me was sort of a way to concretize that sense of validation, competency, accomplishment that, you know, someone who's very, very skilled in this field, has a lot of experience, has directly supervised me, they've signed me off, people at the ICF have given me their official blessing. And so that was and remains helpful to me in those days where I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Right? We all have those, no matter how far into this you get, with any job, really. That's been a helpful thing to kind of, you know, anchor myself back down into. If you do choose to go the certification path, most schools will offer kind of two options. One is like just the core fundamental educational, like raw material, as part one, and then you can choose to bolt on part two, which is additional certification, support, mentorship, supervision. So we'll keep an eye out for that. Some of those certification programs that you go through will inherently certify you with the ICF and with the school simultaneously. Some of them you'll then have to go on and do additional paperwork and steps and submit call recordings to the ICF to actually get the certification through them. So all that information is on the ICF website. Check out their different like paths, portfolio path and all of that for your different options to kind of mix and match if you do think you want to go on to pursue certification. Okay. FAQ number 4, how does my business actually look, feel, operate, day in the life, week in the life? Again, of course, this is just speaking from my experience. A lot of coaches do this differently. My business is really focusing on two sort of primary paths of revenue generation. One is I am a contractor with a company called BetterUp. They are sort of a B2B clearinghouse for really large enterprise corporations around the world that want to have coaching offered to their employees, but it's not a function they can or want to bring actually in-house. So that company will sign a contract with BetterUp. Then some of their employees get access and to the coaching hours. Some of them will get matched with me. And then my relationship is just one-on-one with the employees from there. There are lots of other companies besides BetterUp that operate on a more or less similar model. So that is one sort of line of business or revenue for me. And that's something that I have total flexibility over my hours, my client load. It's a fixed rate. And that really helps give me a little bit of sort of predictability and continuity in my business. The second path of revenue generation is private one-on-one clients. So these are people who have found me through the magic of the internet and want to work one-on-one. There is no sort of corporate sponsor mediating that relationship. This is the fun, juicy, best part of the business. This is the part that most people who are interested in going out, starting their own coaching business, that's sort of that private client base is really their bread and butter of what most people are looking to do. That is something where you get typically much higher dollars per hour, depending on what you set your rates at, compared to a corporate engagement. It's also much more variable, and it requires a lot more of that marketing, administrative, sort of salesy, tech stack competency to get that up and running. So around those two lines of business, I also have, a few other like smaller offerings that I dabble in. I have an on-demand video course series. That's a much lower price point than my one-on-one offerings that are live. And I also continue to experiment with offering like small subscription packages for certain folks who reach out that maybe aren't like a natural fit for one of my other offerings, but they do still want some support, and I see some mutual value there. That's part of the fun of entrepreneurship, is you get to really make it up as you go and define what it is that sounds, mutually uplifting, compelling, impactful, for everyone involved, and you just get to kind of create that on the fly and roll with it, which is so much fun. At least it is for me. So I would say about 15 to 20 hours a week, maybe a little bit less than that, I spend with my BetterUp clients. Those are just recurring, booked into my calendar in a fairly passive way. I spend another probably 5 hours a week with private clients. And then the rest of the time I'm spending doing content development. Now, this is going to be different depending on how you structure your business. But for me, the approach that I've started with, at least, and I'm planning to continue for the time being, is very content marketing heavy. So it's coming up with, thought leadership, blog posts, LinkedIn content, meditations, PDFs, videos like this that provide a lot of value, give folks a sense of sort of my competency, my sweet spot, and will hopefully, and does work as a client attractor so that they have a decent sense of who I am, what I like to work with, what I'm all about, and if I might have something that's useful for them by the time they reach out. So that takes quite a lot of time and energy. Now, I've deliberately designed my business that way because I actually really like doing that stuff. So you get to kind of pursue whatever marketing and lead generation strategy works best for you. But the content marketing angle is the one that I've chosen. And so that's a significant chunk of my time. Other than that, I'm doing, typical back-end paperwork, admin type stuff. Although I've also designed my business so that most of that is alleviated, and I really don't spend that much time on sort of administrative minutia. Okay. Let's talk about niches. This is super, super important. It's one that very few coaching schools actually teach you how to do. This video is not going to teach you how to do them either. That is outside the scope of what we're talking about here today. But this is just a note to say that finding a niche is non-negotiable. It's mission critical. It's a must-have. You may not know what your niche is going to be at this point, and that is fine, but know that you do need to figure it out before you expect to start receiving any amount of revenue or client exposure. Most coach training schools will kind of set you free as like a blank slate, like you're a multi-purpose tool that could coach anyone on anything at any time for any reason. And it's good to have that flexibility and that diversity in your background. But when it comes to marketing purposes, that's dead in the water, right? We're all, it's the attention economy now. It's very, very hard to capture people's attention and, mind space. So you have to be super, super specific and repetitive about the very tightly defined problem that you solve and for whom and how you solve that problem. So just start thinking about what that might be. This is something that, I was fortunate, and a reason that I am an advocate for working with a company like BetterUp. I'm not like a representative for them. They don't know I'm doing this. I'm not getting a commission or anything, I promise. But that kind of concept has been really great for me because it exposed me to a super, super diverse array of clients, people that I would never have exposure to, and we would never find each other or connect with each other any other way. That allowed me, before I found my niche, to get some revenue in, get some practice, build up my confidence, build up my sort of bank of hours and client stories, and figure out what I actually liked talking about. Because I had no idea what I wanted my focus to be when I graduated from my coaching program. So this was a great way to sort of a win-win. It allowed me to refine what that focus area was and get a lot of practice and reps in with it, so that when it came time to do marketing and promotion around my private one-on-one offerings, where I do get to choose my clients, I could be super specific and clear about the types of challenges and goals that I am best suited to help with. Okay, next question. We're halfway through. I'm going to try to make the rest of this fast. So let's talk about the nitty gritty, money. What is it actually like? How hard is it to hack it as a coach out there? Again, I'm only speaking from my experience and, anecdotally from a handful of friends who I have who are also kind of pursuing this path. I'm about almost a year into full-time focusing on this business. I had a small kind of side hustle going on with this before, when I was still fully employed in the corporate world. And for me, it's definitely been slow and steady growth, right? So you certainly want to have a financial safety net in place before you pull the plug on whatever it is that you're doing today and go all in. What I did was I front loaded all of my educational expenses, my certification expenses, my expenses around, getting my website up and running, filing for my business license, all of that stuff I did while I was still fully employed so that I wasn't so stressed out and overwhelmed by those expenses. I also was socking away money while I was still in the tech world to kind of give myself a little bit of a safety net, a nest egg, knowing that I was going to be living at least somewhat off of savings for at least a year. And that has turned out to be true so far. So that has made it a much gentler process. It's made it a lot less terrifying because the last thing that you need when you're starting a business on top of like all of the learning and newness is to also be like having a panic attack every time you look at your credit card statement. So if you can, by all means, build yourself that safety net and expect that, you're probably looking at least a year to actually being sort of reliably in the black. Of course, that can vary wildly for people. The folks who I see come right out of the gate, like raring to go, and they're just making money hand over fist, are typically, not exclusively, but typically much older people. Talking about like boomer or late Gen Xers who have been like really, really highly placed in like the executive search, HR, recruiting world. And they're truly just doing executive coaching, and they have an MBA and loads of, high up, well-placed connections, and have been laying the groundwork for like 25 years, right? Those folks usually are making bank right out of the gate. That's not to say it's not possible otherwise, but just know that, especially if you're in sort of a newer niche or one that requires a lot of like education and awareness building, and you're younger in your career, you have fewer connections, that you will probably need a longer on-ramp. Okay, let's talk about other lines of business for coaches. So the most frequent things that you will see is coaches who do some private one-on-one work. They'll also do group work. And then outside of the peer coaching realm, they will do speaking engagements, paid or free as sort of a marketing avenue. They will write either sort of like guest articles for, Forbes or HBR or any of the million other more accessible publications out there, or they're writing books. They're developing on-demand courses. They're working as facilitators, which is a pretty closely sort of like a cousin skill set to coaching, or they're doing consulting, like full-on consulting, where they do little dabbles of coaching in there as well. That's sort of the background that I came out of. So you have a ton of freedom. You could also be doing something completely unrelated to coaching to be a diversified supplemental income source. So you could pick up, dog walking. You could be selling art pieces on the side, acting in commercials, whatever the hell you want. Really, there's a ton of freedom and flexibility, which is what's one of the many things that's so fun about this. Okay, moving on to the next question. What do I love about coaching? What's awesome? What are the highlights about it? I just mentioned sort of the freedom and flexibility that you have. Again, this is assuming that you're talking about sort of a solopreneur, entrepreneur model in which you're owning your own business. Within that freedom, you get to be super focused, and that focus enables really, really high impact. So the more specific you are, the clearer you are on who you are, what your value proposition is, the more impact you can have. And it's freaking beautiful, and it's the most amazing, fulfilling thing in the entire world to be like, here is my purpose, my passion, the thing that I am so fired up about and want to make a difference in the world. And I can draw a really straight line between what I'm doing every single day and that purpose. It's amazing. And watching your clients sort of spread their wings, unfold, flourish in partnership with you, lined up with that mission, is the best thing out there, in my humble opinion. What's also really interesting about coaching is it's super focused on empowerment and self-sufficiency, right? It's kind of different from, well, it's very different from a model of like therapy, where there can be sort of underlying dynamics of dependence being nurtured there. Keep coming every week for the rest of your life, and maybe then you'll be fixed. Coaching is really different, right? I do not want my clients to be dependent on me. My entire job is to get them to realize and to help show them that they already have everything they need, right? I'm the temporary sort of guide, walking partner in life. But really I am unnecessary. And my goal is to work myself out of a job every single time. It also, with that, really inverts traditional power dynamics that a lot of us are just super fed up with and done with, especially in the corporate world right now. Because again, it's not about me coming in as this, guru who's got it all figured out. I certainly don't have it all figured out. I've got a little bit figured out, but it's really about helping you figure your own stuff out. And showing you that you are absolutely powerful and you don't have to rely on any other source of authority to grant that power and autonomy and agency to you. So it's really refreshing. And I think that's what a lot of people are drawn to this profession for. Last thing, which is, sort of a double-edged sword, and we'll talk more about it, is this line of work forces you to walk your talk. Okay, so whatever your niche is, whatever that specialty is, most coaches usually have some underlying thing about, wellness, work-life balance, mental health, all of that kind of stuff is kind of inherently implied in a lot of these. And if you have not dealt with your stuff, it is going to come up with your clients. So if you love personal development, if you nerd out on this stuff, if, sort of tending to your own growth and transformation is a really high priority for you, this is awesome because you're killing two birds with one stone, right? You're honoring your personal growth journey and you're using that then to kind of model and advise and help give back to your clients who are just a few steps behind you. It's also really intense, and we'll talk about that. Okay, what's not great about coaching, or really, what are some reasons you should not get into this line of work? I talked to a lot of coaches, and I myself was frankly at least somewhat in this bucket many years ago. If you are someone who really, really likes being the fixer, the helper, the saver, the rescuer, if you love giving advice, if you kind of get off on being the one with all the answers, if you have any sort of history of codependent tendencies, if you don't have super clear boundaries yourself, if you like getting absorbed in other people's shit so that you don't have to deal with your own, these are really big things to watch out for. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't become a coach, doesn't mean you have to be perfect with any of these things, right? I'm certainly not, and I certainly wasn't. But these are things that I see over and over again, kind of are like the shadow side of what draws people into becoming a coach. And that can actually end up being really useful material if you're aware of it and you work with it and you deal with that shit. Then you can help other people deal with it. But you need to be cognizant of it and not just blindly, go into this line of work because it kind of happens to jive well with some of your unresolved emotional baggage. Okay. This is a really interesting area that for me, at least, all of that stuff that I just mentioned are what I work with my clients on, boundary issues, being able to speak up, ask for help, have reciprocal balanced relationships that are healthy, clear, direct communication, healing codependency. All of those things are what I work with my clients on. And it took me a while to realize why so many coaches were in my prospective client pool. I was like, oh, maybe just because I know a lot of them. It's actually because these issues are really, really disproportionately common among people who choose this kind of line of work. So if you want help with that, we can work together. But really, the exhortation here is just be aware and be really, really proactive about working on your stuff. And be honest with yourself. If those are the reasons, all that garbage that I mentioned a moment ago, if those are the reasons that are really drawing you to this is a real painful way to go about healing them. It can be useful, right? But it's something that you want to make sure that you're doing the work for your clients and not just sort of projecting your issues onto them. See, light and easy. Let's transition to a more tactical, lightweight question that I get a lot about corporate setup and liability insurance. So very quick answers here. You can get an LLC. I do not have one. I have a sole proprietorship. Do your research on that. Everyone's legal, financial situation and priorities are different. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. For my purposes, I went with a sole proprietorship and I do not currently hold liability insurance. because I am super, super tight about who I let in as a one-on-one client. I am not working with people who are litigious, who are prone to, drama and attacks. All of those people are very swiftly filtered out of my practice. And I also set up very, very clear, blunt, explicit agreements about boundaries, limitations, scope of practice with people. I have them sign it. I save all of those up front. And so for that reason, I haven't felt it necessary to have more legal protection around my practice at this point. But again, that's going to be different for everyone. And depending on your niche, may be a very prudent idea. Okay, 2 more. Question number 11, how can I find out more about all this stuff? Start with the ICF website, International Coach Federation. Just Google it. They will list out schools, like I mentioned earlier, whose programs count towards your, they're accredited, they count towards your certification. They'll list out certification specific programs. They will list out mentor coaches who can supervise you if you do want to go through supervision. Again, that's something I don't currently offer, but plenty of other folks do. And they list all of their certified coaches, not just the small subset that are screened to be mentor coaches, but all ICF certified coaches around the world. And that's a really great way to go about finding a coach for yourself, which brings me to another very important point within this question. And that is, please, 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 if you are actually seriously considering making a big investment in, overhauling your career, starting a business as coach, for the love of all that is holy, please get your own coach before you do that. That is, coaches are expensive, but that is a much lower risk way to find out if this is even a style that you like, if this is a modality that you like, from the client side of it, before you sink a whole bunch of money into a training and certification program and potentially uproot your life and your career. You would be shocked how many folks reach out to me saying, I want to become a coach. And I'm like, cool, who's your coach? What school are you going to go to? Do you want to get certified? What research have you done? And crickets, blank stare. So do your research, get a coach, baby step this out in a really thoughtful way before you make a big decision. And also be considerate too that if you're wanting to reach out to other coaches like myself to kind of pick their brain and get a sense of, what it's like, do some networking. For all of us, time is money, okay? Our time is monetized. That's how we make our living. And so if you can, please, please, please do your research, Google all the basic questions before you reach out for a networking call. Just to show respect for their time. Okay. Anyone who's any professional coach who's taking time out of their day to talk to you and give you some advice is sacrificing revenue that they could have been earning in that time to do so. So be respectful of them. Google whatever you can beforehand. Do your own legwork so that the questions you're bringing to them are really things that are more personal, more specific, maybe unique to that coach's niche or whatever, to make it impactful and relevant and a good use of time for both of you. Okay, last but not least, is this really okay for me to try? Is it okay that I'm even thinking about making this leap into coaching, right? There's so much self-doubt and nervousness, inner critic, doubt from our colleagues, partners, friends, family about like, what is this crazy thing you're talking about doing? It's very normal to want validation, okay? So is this really okay for you? Yeah, probably, with a big caveat, okay? This is not for the faint of heart. Being a professional coach, being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. You have to be ready to do a lot of marketing. You have to be usually quite vulnerable in the process of doing that marketing. You have to show up every single day to be vulnerable and be doing that marketing. There's a lot of self-promotion involved in this when you are the product, okay? And it's very personal. The income is unpredictable. You have to be able to walk the talk, like I mentioned. You have to be constantly growing and constantly getting a few steps ahead of your audience, your target market, your client population. Another thing is that I don't think it's talked about enough is actually everyone could probably use a coach, but there's a very, very small range of conditions that make a prospective client actually right to be coached. It requires a lot of maturity, some degree of openness, self-awareness, flexibility, lots of optimism, frankly, for their lives. They have to be at a certain level of, sort of emotional, cognitive, professional, financial function to begin with, and they have to really want to be challenged. They have to want somebody to push them outside their comfort zone. They have to take accountability for themselves and not just be hoping to foist their problems off onto you as the coach. And unfortunately, there's not a whole ton of people out there in the world who are sort of in that sweet spot at any given moment. That's not to say that there's a scarcity of opportunity out there, but it's something to just do sort of a reality check with yourself. You also can't be afraid of conflict, of giving direct feedback, of being assertive, of being clear, being firm about your boundaries. Those are problems that most coaches and most humans in general really, really struggle with. So all of these are things that you want to go in very clear-eyed about this line of work. And the way, just to summarize, that I kind of think about this is only do it, only start your own coaching business if you are so on fire with a specific purpose that you want to help your clients achieve that you cannot imagine doing any other line of work. If your soul just like shrivels up and dies when you think about doing anything else, of getting that easy, recurring, guaranteed paycheck every month with the 401k, if that holds any appeal to you at all still, it's going to be really, really hard to get up every day and execute on what needs to be done to build your own coaching business. So this is not to discourage you, but this is really just to help you clarify and sort of separate out and identify where you might fall on this, and hopefully save you some time and money and heartache in the process, and set you up to have a really thriving, purpose-filled, joyful, action-oriented business if you do choose to go down that path. So this is very long. Thanks for hanging with me. If you have more in-depth questions that I did not cover here and are not already covered on Google, and you do want some more personalized coaching, mentoring, advising as you are beginning your journey into this line of work, let me know. Fill out the contact form on my website, which is meredith-fay.com. And I'm happy to explore paid mentorship options with you if that's something that you're interested in pursuing further. Thank you so much, and I wish you the very best of luck on your path with this. Take care.